Welcome to Connected Intelligence, a podcast about all the things we bring to work that aren't actually about the work. Join us in conversation about the building blocks that bring complex ideas to life, not the code, calculations, or research, but the bonds between teammates, the connection to your purpose, and the character that you build along the way. Welcome back, listeners. I'm your host, Sonia Senek. Today's episode is an absolute delight. We chat with Cameron Bailey, CEO of the Toronto International Film Festival. Cameron shapes the vision and strategy of one of Canada's premier cultural brands, responsible for presenting the world's largest public film festival every September. A champion of diverse voices and bold storytelling, he's been the guiding force in transforming TIFF into a global hub known for groundbreaking international premieres to Oscar-bound favorites. With an eye for brilliance and a heart for storytelling, Cameron Bailey talks to us today about the evolution of technology in film, creating magical moments with an audience, and how important it is to remember that the audience is us. We had the joy of recording this video episode downtown Toronto within the walls of the TIFF Lightbox. Please enjoy Cameron Bailey. Cameron, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
So you are a transformative leader in the Canadian cultural landscape.
Thank you.
I want to wind the tape back to the University of Western Ontario, where I understand you started working in their school newspaper and started to get sort of a flavor and a passion for film critique. So how did that all start for you?
Well, it started with me walking onto the campus at what's now called Western University as the very first person in my family to go to university. So it was all new. I had left Toronto to go there, so I didn't really know many people there, but I had written a lot. I was the co-editor of my high school newspaper, and I loved writing. I began writing opinion pieces, actually, and editorials when I was still in high school. And so I wanted to see what that was like. Walked into the offices of the Gazette, the campus newspaper, still running. It's been there for over 100 years at Western. And, I was a literature student. I loved the arts, and they sent me out to review concerts. So I began reviewing music, concerts and records, albums at that point, LPs, and then started taking some film courses at Western. And then I started to review films. And that's really what led to where I am now, because it was the introduction of cinema beyond just pure entertainment movies to me at Western that really opened my mind. And then I began writing about them and thinking about them, and then here we are.
And so here we are, meaning you've been at TIFF now for over 25 years.
That's right.
And I imagine that there's just so many different chapters of how the festival and now TIFF, now that it's a year-round organization, when you first started out, could you have imagined what the festival became? Because take us back to what it was when you got your first role at TIFF.
So when I started at TIFF, this was 1990, and 1990 was the same year that what was then called the Festival of Festivals. That's how we started in 1976. But the Festival of Festivals took on a cinematheque from the Ontario government, actually, which had an organization up in North York. And also a library, the Film Reference Library. So we began to expand our operations the same year that I started. But I started as a freelance programmer. I was just working a few months every year, being one of the people helping to select the Canadian films at our festival. I did that for 5 years. And during that time, I also went to Africa for the first time with the then head of programming, Piers Handling, who became the CEO. And we touched down in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, for something called FESPACO, which was the biggest Pan-African film festival in the world. And that turned me on to African cinema. I started something called Planet Africa at the festival in 1995, which was a kind of a survey of African and African diasporic cinema at the festival. And bit by bit, I just began to expand my range of interest, just following my own curiosity. And then left the festival in after the 1997 festival, came back in the mid-2000s, and just began to just expand what I was doing from there. But it began with learning how to not just look at films and understand what makes one film better than another, what makes a film work better than another, but also understand how films work on audiences. That's really what we do here at TIFF. And it was it was a big learning curve to go beyond my own tastes. I like this, I don't like that,
Mm.
to I can imagine the film that I'm watching by myself on a small monitor somewhere or in a little screening room just alone, how that's going to work playing in front of 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 people. That was really something I had to learn.
When you are thinking about that relationship with the audience, have you ever had moments at TIFF where you were very surprised by a reaction, where you anticipated it was going to go one way and maybe it was 180 degrees the other?
Yeah, not like 180 degrees, but there's often times when films play bigger emotionally than you might have expected because I watched it by myself or with a small group. I remember seeing 12 Years a Slave, Steve McQueen's film, the Fox Searchlight film at the time, and I was the only one in the theater. And, it was powerful for me, but then to actually play it here at the Princess of Wales in front of 1,800 people and to come back after the film with Steve and the cast on stage and to just hear the thunderous applause. But then when we started the Q&A, just the silence, people were still processing what they'd experienced. And it was a collective experience. And that's always going to be a bigger one. It's amplified, right? And so many times that's happened, whether it's a comedy that's really kind of brought the whole audience together in laughter, or a suspense film or a horror movie where they're just, they're clutching each other's arms. That bigger experience is what always is both a little surprising, but really gratifying. And sometimes films where you're not entirely sure, will the audience love it like I do? So often you're happily surprised by them.
Over the course of your 25 plus years working at TIFF, I'm sure you've had a number of different roles. What's been your favorite role?
That's hard to say. I mean, everything has had its own kind of pleasures and challenges, I will say. My current role as CEO of TIFF, it gives enormous reach to what I can do with our team here. But there are enormous responsibilities. There's a lot of weight you carry on your shoulders in this role as well. When I was a programmer, especially when I began programming internationally, that was really exciting because I got to travel to places I had never been before and, go to a suburb in Johannesburg to watch a film in a surprisingly spectacular movie theater that somebody had in their house, like a giant, I don't know, like 50-seat movie theater in their house to watch a movie, or to walk up the back stairs in an alley in Calcutta and watch a film in an editing room by a filmmaker there. Those kinds of experiences where you're free roaming, and sometimes our international programmers, sometimes will be just roaming out around the world and just following leads, they're tracking down films. And somebody says, you have to go meet this new filmmaker in Manila. And so you go meet that new filmmaker in Manila. That's really exciting. You feel kind of like a, international man of mystery. So that was fun to do. You can't do that forever, but that was really a lot of fun.
International Man of Mystery, Austin Powers, of course, did not first premiere at TIFF,
No.
but it's a great shout out. And in that experience, Cameron, of traveling all around the world and experiencing film with different audiences and also attracting such diverse audiences to this festival and to the work you do at TIFF, how do you characterize the magic of the shared experience of a movie and a film? And what have you seen as a common thread in these different spaces you've been in as you've been able to sit in audiences and experience the magic of movies?
I certainly believe that we are social animals. We're curious about each other. We want to connect. There's lots of reasons why we don't, in everyday life when you're walking down the street or on the subway, whatever it might be. There's lots of barriers we have up. And I think all we really need is something to just pull those barriers down a little bit. Sometimes you're in the line at the grocery and somebody makes a joke and suddenly that just opens up a conversation. Art does that so well, whether it's being at a concert together and it's people who gather because they all love the same artist and they're moved by the music and suddenly they feel like they know each other because they're sharing an experience. Movies do that so well. I think because partly just the actual physical experience. The lights go down, you're in the dark, so you can't quite see around each other and you're a little more vulnerable but also more open. and then this giant screen is in front of you and the sound is all around you and it's rumbling through your body. I feel like that opens up that social connection in a way that you don't have in daily life. And then you're ready to actually feel what the people around you are feeling as well. And that's the magic, I think. In Toronto, people have grown to love that experience. And I think what the population of Toronto brings to that is the fact that not only are they open to that communal social experience, but they bring experiences from all over the planet, literally, to watching a movie together, right? Half the people in Toronto were born outside of Canada. We speak 200 languages in this city. We're plugged into the whole world. We love movies from all over the world. And that experience together, I think it's really unique to what we do every year.
It's incredible. And would you say that, given that you're talking about this amazing experience that's created through film and through art, as CEO of a year-round organization that also has, real estate and people coming in and out of your doors, as well as managing this massive festival every September, this internationally renowned festival, how do you consider the way that you lead your team and in the way that you make decisions as a leader? What's that interplay like?
It's a great question. I think it starts with making sure that our team stays connected to the impact that we have. Just last weekend, we had a sing-along screening of Encanto.
Oh, fun.
And it was fun. And, lots of families there, young and old. And we gave out green glow sticks. So whenever Bruno was on screen, people were waving around the green glow sticks. They were just singing their hearts out. 8-year-old kids who know all the words to all the songs. And that's the kind of thing that I want our staff to always just like stop in, experience that, witness that, see what that's like. And then when you're looking at a spreadsheet about next year's budget, then you remember why we do this. So it's really important, no matter what your role is at TIFF, that you see the part that you play in delivering that experience to people, really bringing that kind of joy to audiences that I think like a collective movie experience can always do at its best. So I think it starts with that. It starts with making sure that we find people who come to this organization with real passion for what we do, who are good collaborators, who like to work with each other, who can work through challenges, because there are always challenges here. And, sometimes we talk about two different kinds of work that we do at TIFF, hunting and farming. And it's a kind of really simple way of talking about the work of putting on a single event that's limited in time, 11 days every September, which is when our festival happens, and like working towards that deadline. And it's like putting on the show, like the circus is coming to town, and it opens on Friday night. So we got to get everything ready, and everybody's rushing towards that deadline. So many of us do that leading up to that same September peak. On the other hand, some of the stuff is not that hunting kind of energy, but it's farming energy. It's planning, knowing the cycle of the whole year, much more predictable in some ways, and it requires a different kind of mindset. And you have to know, no matter what your job is at TIFF, whether you're in hunting mode or farming mode, and you can't get those two things confused. Because if you try to farm like a hunter, it's not going to work, and if you try to hunt like a farmer, it's not going to work. So yeah, that's what we do.
I'm assuming the intensity and the excitement and the high energy of the month of September is not something that you can sustain all year round as a team. And so do you have conversations with your team about intentionally switching gears between hunting and farming? I would assume that coming out of the end of September, everyone would feel hopefully on a high, just really, really great about what they've just achieved. And how do you approach building year over year and shaping what the next set of goals are with the team?
We have what I think most organizations have. We have annual plans and budgets and targets and key performance indicators and all of those kinds of things. We have strategic plans that we work with. They used to be 5-year plans. Now they're 3-year plans because the world.
Yeah.
So we try to plan and work to that plan as much as possible, understanding that things will just like surprise us. 2020, everything surprised us. I was in this building, it's middle of March, I think maybe the 13th or something, when we had to make the call to shut the building down. And at the end of the screenings that afternoon, we closed our doors. And then suddenly we had to kind of figure it out. There will always be something like that, an actor's strike last year. There'll be other things that come. And so it's a matter of keeping our teams motivated through the regular cycle of the year,
Mhm.
the rhythm of that peak in September, and the anticipation, as much as we can do, of whatever kind of, uh, freak storm is going to come
Yeah.
our way on the horizon,
And through your hunting and farming work,
Hmm.
TIFF has become an incredibly internationally renowned festival for launching films such as Ray, Silver Linings Playbook, Slumdog Millionaire. It's had these huge moments in the international spotlight. Can you think back to some of those moments and take us through what it felt like for you and your team? Because I'm sure we just see that point in time, but I'm sure that building up to moments like that takes a ton of work behind the scenes. And how does it feel to be on the inside of moments like that?
It's exciting. I remember the year of Slumdog Millionaire, for instance. I saw it with Piers Handling, who was then CEO, at a screening room in London, just the two of us. And, we knew Danny Boyle's work. We didn't know the actors at the time, never heard of Frida Pinto or Dev Patel at that time, but um, loved the film. And it came to us in limbo already, because this was a film, I think most people know the story by now, where its original studio, Warner Independent, didn't quite know what to do with it and was initially going to just put it straight out to video. Because it,
When you could go straight out to video.
yes, exactly, right. Um, that uh, that screening that we had in a screening room in London got us excited enough to invite the film, and then the film eventually changed hands and ended up with Searchlight by the time it came to our festival. And as we began to screen the film, like from the first screening to the next screening to the next screening, you could see that building momentum,
Mhm.
right? People came out going, wow, that was so much fun. That was exciting. I went on a real ride. I didn't know where the film was going to go. I didn't know these actors. The film is, half in Hindi, half in English. And it just felt like it was a roller coaster. And people often say they don't make movies like that anymore. They constantly make movies like that, right? You just have to find them, right? And you
Yeah.
have to be open to that experience. But every year there are movies that remind people how exciting it can be to just enter into a story that you don't know where it's taking you. And so then to see, and what was also great about that year was Frida Pinto actually has family in the suburbs of Toronto in Mississauga. And so that film won our People's Choice Award. So by the end of the festival, once everybody had voted, it was clearly the popular choice. And Frida was still in the city because she was out with her folks in Mississauga. So she came to the award ceremony, accepted the award on behalf of Danny Boyle and the whole film. And then that was just the start of their whole ride all the way up to the Oscar stage and winning Best Picture and all of those other Oscars on that night. It was an incredible thing to be a part of.
Based on the work that you're doing, you're constantly building relationships. I'm assuming you have long-term relationships with different studios, different directors, artists. How do you approach with just the volume of work that you do here and the constantly changing and dynamic nature of the creative industry? What's your approach to building and sustaining great positive relationships?
Mhm. Try not to be a jerk. I think it starts there.
Rule number one.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then the other rule, which goes alongside it, is learn how to work with jerks because they're out there and not everybody's going to treat you kindly. Not everybody's going to always tell you the truth in every situation. So even as you try to bring your own values to every interaction that you have, being candid and kind and, all the things that our parents teach us, you don't always find that in the sometimes cutthroat business environment or professional environment that we work in. The entertainment industry has both high octane creative talent with the volatility that sometimes brings. It has high octane business people who can be harsh sometimes. And you have to learn how to navigate those things. And I have, early in my career, I had a lot of disappointments. Part of the reason I left the festival after my initial, I think, 8-year run in the 90s was I was just kind of tired, you
Mm.
know? I was too often disappointed by people. And then when you're sometimes disappointed by people that you revere, that's hard to, and I'm not going to name names. But
I wouldn't ask.
okay. Um, but over time, I learned, right? And I can only control my own behavior and how I deal with people myself. And I learned to anticipate some of the things that might be thrown at me, and also to try to find colleagues that I could surround myself with, and you're stronger together when you
Mhm.
do that. So, um, I've had people from Los Angeles yelling in my ear on the phone. I've had people be dishonest to my face. I've had all the things that you could expect in a professional life, but I'm much more equipped to deal with it than I used to be.
Those disappointments, I love how you frame that of just, there's some disappointments and they're tiring.
Mm,
What are the tools that you have in your toolbox now to deal with those that maybe some of our listeners or the audience that's watching can learn from as
mhm.
far as how they approach their professional work?
Yeah, I think perspective is the first one. We take this work very seriously. We want to put on the best possible event every single time, both year round and at the festival for our audience. We want to deliver for all of our stakeholders all the time. We are not curing cancer or, saving people's lives in a war zone, right? We are not doing that level of work. So we have to keep that perspective in mind at all times. And with that comes a bit of a sense of humor about things. And then also, you try to build relationships so that even when things are tough, right? When sometimes we have to say no a lot in this work, right? People send us films, people who've had many films here in the past, they send us the latest film. It's not right for us. We have to say, I'm sorry, it's not right for us. They might have spent years on it. They might have invested all of their own savings and they might be, hemorrhaging money. And the festival would have been a big help to them. If it's not the right film for us, then we have to say no. So getting through those kinds of things with, um, humility, candor, those kinds of things I think help. Knowing when to step away for a bit. We're in downtown Toronto. There are days when I just kind of step out onto the street, leave the building, just walk around the block, you know, just like chill for a little bit. That helps as well. Sometimes just talking things through with colleagues, those things, just de-escalating, is what I try to do.
Keeping
Yeah.
perspective. I love that.
Hmm.
So speaking of perspective,
Hmm.
we are in a post-COVID world. Sorry to bring up COVID-19, but I
Yeah,
feel
I
like
remember it.
it, same. I feel like it was such a pivotal moment and it shifted so many industries in unexpected ways. Of course, a very obvious impact to the entertainment industry of people not being able to convene and have that shared experience, to share the same space and the same energy and sit in front of that screen as you were describing. In the world post-COVID, after everyone's coming back in now, my guess would be that you're dealing with folks pretty comfortable with streaming at home. And, the couch is a pretty great spot to enjoy a film from or watch an entire series of a TV show. How has that changed the way that people are framing festivals like TIFF and just the act of leaving their house and going to a movie? What are you seeing?
When we closed our doors in March of 2020, we immediately had to figure out how we were going to stay connected with our audience when we were all locked down at home. And in Canada, we were locked down for longer than many places as well. Um, and we did a bunch of things. So first, we began to reach out to our friends and colleagues in the entertainment industry and say, would you join us on a Zoom call and talk about your movie? And we'll make your movie available to people across Canada on a platform. And we hope people will be entertained by this. And we did it, like we did The Princess Bride, we did Before Sunrise, and we got Mandy Patinkin for The Princess Bride and Julie Delpy for Before Sunrise. And those were just very intimate conversations. I did them from my house. My wife's office is where I was Zooming from with people from all over the world. And that was kind of fun. And because we were all in the same situation, it felt like, okay, well, we're going to try this, right? And I think we all did that for a while. I know musicians did Zoom concerts and all kinds of things happened that were intimate and a little bit homemade, but they were right for the time. Um, and then as we were coming out of the pandemic, we knew we had to do something differently because the pandemic really made streaming the dominant force in screen culture now in the screen business. Um, and, you know, I like it too. Everybody does, right? It's fun to sometimes just like binge a show at home. And people have great TVs and great sound systems at home. Many people do now. But we still thought there's something unique that we could offer and other cinemas can offer that you don't get on your sofa. So, and the other thing we realize is that the older audience was going to be slower to come back to cinemas because of health concerns in many cases, or because, once you get used to being on the sofa and you're not going out that much anyways, then, you're going to do it less post pandemic. So we decided to focus on the youth audience and we decided to focus on access as well. And we made two changes in our membership policy. One is all of our Cinematech programming. So these are our classic films, about 250 to 300 every year, would be free with a TIFF membership. And that was galvanizing for a lot of people because suddenly they had access to a lot more films that they wanted to see. They knew about them. Sometimes we show The Godfather, or sometimes all kinds of films, or rarities as well, from all over the world. And that was now free with your membership. And there's many different levels of membership that have a lot of accessibility. The other thing was we started an under 25 pass. So if you're under age 25, you have free access to all of our year-round classics programming and lots of different access points for the festival as well. And that just, like, over the course of, I would say, a year, transformed the demographics of our audience. Suddenly, our membership was much younger. Younger people, I remember this myself, go out more, right? And younger people typically go out socially, right? So they'll go out with friends. And that completely changed our audience. And if you come to a screening at TIFF Lightbox now, you'll see an excited, engaged young audience. And they're watching new films and old films with equal passion. We might show them In the Mood for Love from 20 plus years ago. We might show them a silent film. We might show them, Bresson film from the 50s. And they're interested in that, as interested as they are in the latest anime. And that was great because people often write off young people, young audiences. It's just like a classic thing that people have been doing for thousands of years. The young generation doesn't know what they're doing. And they're not like we used to be. They might be better,
You heard it here first.
Yes, in terms of their curiosity about everything, wanting to see what's the latest South Korean film, what's happening in Argentina, what's the latest with experimental documentary. They're up for it, and so those things were things that we were kind of pushed to innovate to meet that challenge, and we've seen amazing results.
And this generation has the benefit of such connectivity to information, to content, to the summarization of things they may not understand, to learn about things at the pace that suits them. And so it's so interesting to hear that in the film space that you're seeing that demand and that interest. They're just as passionate about the older films as they are the newer ones. And just thinking about the advantage of technology and connectivity, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how you feel emerging technology is going to be shaping, enhancing, or hindering the future of the film industry.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think like any tool, you can use a hammer to hammer a nail in and build a house, or you can just hit somebody over the head with it. It's the same hammer. And it's true with technology, I think, as well. So I've been really inspired by platforms like Letterboxd, for instance, where film fans are finding each other online, posting their own personal reviews of movies that they like, making their own lists, sharing those lists, kind of connecting with other people who are into, Albanian horror from the 1970s, really niche interests. And that's great to see. Technology can also kind of numb us sometimes. Algorithms can numb us sometimes by maybe numbing our curiosity. If you feel like you're constantly being fed what the algorithm thinks you're going to want to see, Sometimes you have to break out of that, maybe break into somebody else's algorithm. That's always fun to do. So I think it's not the technology that is either the risk or the shining beacon. It's more how we direct that technology, how tightly or loosely we hold on to it as users of that technology, um, how we keep some autonomy and some freedom for ourselves.
And I think that theme of craftsmanship, whether it's lighting or sound or picture, um, the space that something's filmed in, I think your point about using this as a tool of another thing that we need to craft and shape into the spaces on our terms, how we want it to feel is really, really well said. How far away do you think the entertainment industry or the creative artists industry is from understanding and embracing that? Like, what are the conversations like right now? Is it a fear-based conversation? Is it is there an openness there? What are you hearing?
From artists, I'm hearing, I would say, some ambivalence, but also excitement. There are films now, for instance, that might choose to shoot on 35 millimeter film because they like that aesthetic, and that's an old technology, and it's harder to do that because digital is faster in so many ways. But you can choose to do that, and at the same time, you can use state of the art AI tools to modulate vocal performances from your actors. Right? You can take a voice sample from an actor if it's robust enough and make that actor speak a language they do not speak, which is unbelievable, right? But you can shoot that film on 35 and then have your English speaking actor speak Thai, through AI, right? So that's interesting, right? And I think the artists see the possibilities of that. I think the business people um, are excited maybe for different reasons, seeing maybe profit opportunities from new technology, but I think they're also aware that the technology can overwhelm and swamp all of the industry norms very quickly. Um, Nobody, I think, at every single change of technology was ever fully aware of what sound would bring to cinema, what color would bring to cinema, what VHS video would bring to how people watch movies, and now what streaming would bring to the world of film. Like, we always have these, I think, quite limited imaginations of what the technology can do. And it always does more, but also sometimes less in terms of the things we were paranoid about. Those don't necessarily happen. Like, people have been saying that film is dead for 100 years,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Still not dead, but it's changed a lot.
Do you remember there were a few years there, or there's quite a period of time where everyone was just convinced that everything was going to be 3D? Do you remember that
Yes.
conversation?
Oh my God. Yeah. And I'll tell you, for us during the festival, that was really hard because 3D requires certain technology with projectors and
Glasses.
the glasses and all of that. It changes the amount of time you need between screenings because you've got to cycle through the glasses, get new clean glasses, all those kinds of things. And our schedules and our technical production were just totally disrupted by 3D. And you had some people in the industry saying this is the new normal, this is the future of cinema. And there was we showed Gravity at the festival, which is a spectacular 3D film. But how many films like Gravity were there really? Not very many. And in the end, it was a bit of a passing trend, as it was in the 1950s when it first came out as well. So, we recently did a series of some more experimental 3D. It's an interesting technology if used in the right way, but it's not that kind of fully transformative um, technology that maybe people thought it was. So you got to keep a bit of a skeptical sense of all of this.
Yeah. So this year will be the 50th year for TIFF. And just a few months ago, you announced a first of its kind project in North America to establish a marketplace for screening projects. I'd love to learn more about that project and also how that plays into the 50th anniversary.
Sure. So in 2026, we plan to launch a content market alongside our festival, so happening at the same time in Toronto in the same place. And there isn't in North America a market and a festival that happen simultaneously, as there is in Berlin at the Berlin Film Festival, which happens when the European film market is happening, and in Cannes as well. The advantage of that is you've got the premieres of new films and the directors and the actors and the excitement that comes with a festival alongside the business that is also necessary. This is how new projects get financed. It's how people get attached to producers or directors or screenwriters get attached to projects. And it's how completed films get sold for international distribution all over the world, whether that's in theaters or on streaming or TV. So these two things feed each other. They're symbiotic. That hasn't happened in North America. There is a standalone market in America, the American film market, but there isn't what they have in Europe. We want to be that place, and we think we can bring a lot of new value to the industry globally. It is a much more global industry than it used to be, with financing and new talent coming, especially, I would say, from Europe, from Asia, in ways that hadn't existed before. There's more integration than there used to be. And with all of that, people need to meet face to face, right? We all have Zoom. We all have PDFs that you can sign.
We all have 3D glasses. No,
Yes.
we don't, though.
Well, yeah, hopefully we don't need those for much longer. But we all have tools that allow us to work remotely. But there's a reason that you and I are sitting across from each other. There's a reason why people who are going to sign a deal that might be a $5 million deal sit across from each other to do that, right? The human contact, the level of trust that's built up, just the pleasure of being with another person, all of those kinds of things require in-person meeting. So that's what we plan to bring to the festival as of 2026.
That's fantastic. And how do you see that playing into the international nature of TIFF? Do you see this being a beacon for welcoming the world to both the festival and also to the marketplace? Is that one of the goals, is to continue to have this international reach?
Absolutely. We have really benefited so much by being in an international city, in a city that is a direct flight from every place that people do movie business, right? You can get on a plane in Tokyo or Hong Kong or Shanghai, whatever it might be, and get off the plane and you're in the thick of what we do here. And so we want to grow that. I travel to international markets as well, whether that's in Busan in Korea. I was recently in Goa in India and Jeddah in Saudi Arabia, where there are new markets for those regions. And those are important contacts for North Americans to have. It's important for people to understand that the talent comes from everywhere, right? And the Hollywood stars we know are often from Australia or Ireland or India or wherever it might be. And so the business and the creativity is very global now, as it was like in the 1930s. Hollywood essentially raided Europe and got all of their best writers and directors and some actors as well, Marlene Dietrich and many others. So we want to be a kind of a meeting place for all of that. And I think we've got in Toronto not just the conditions in terms of our immigrant population and the diversity of the city, but also a staff that is really passionate about that as well. We never want to be parochial, right? We feel like we're in a totally cosmopolitan environment, and we want to really use that to help serve what the industry wants.
You're making me think of that saying, which is, brilliance is evenly distributed, opportunities not.
100%.
And this can really be a channel for global brilliance to come to Toronto, and for the wonderful work that you and your team do to help elevate these talents.
Yeah, it's so true. And the other thing I'll just say is the movie industry, like I think every creative industry, follows one path, which is about, let's do what we did before, sequels, prequels, reboots, because we've seen that works and that's more reliable. But then also there's always like a shock of the new. There's a film out right now. We should screened it just a couple of days ago at the Lightbox, called The Brutalist by Brady Corbett. It's 3 hours and 35 minutes, shot and presented for a 70 millimeter film presentation with an intermission, right? Things that people don't do. Everybody would have told you never. It's a highly ambitious artistic film that anyone who was just following business principles of what's worked before would say, this can never work. It is one of the most celebrated films of the year. It is a contender in awards season. And that it's those moments that will force people to open up their minds. Like when, Greta Gerwig made Lady Bird, or Barry Jenkins made Moonlight, or Bong Joon-ho, burst onto the scene with Parasite, having made many films in South Korea that film heads were totally into. But suddenly the industry realized, oh yeah, you can make a film entirely in Korean that is essentially a class conscious drama, you know, and that can win the Best Picture Oscar, make millions and millions of dollars, and touch people deeply. So it's those disruptors that keep this industry going. We need the disruption as much as we need the next sequel.
And is it that those disruptors also have a way of connecting with an audience that maybe the spreadsheets or the business didn't necessarily consider to be as impactful as it could be? Like, is it the audience that really decides effectively what really makes it as impactful as these films have become?
I think it is, but I think when we say the audience, we have to say us, right? We are the audience, and we're complicated human beings. So, yes, we actually like sequels. We like the familiar. We like to see something that we've seen before and familiar characters, and we want to see, we watched 23, 25 Marvel
Yeah.
Cinematic Universe movies.
Yeah, and we maybe cried in one or two of them.
Right?
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So, when when there are those moments when the Captain America's shield, it becomes that pivotal moment and the audience cheers in the movie theater, it's because they've seen all of the other movies. They're part of that long arc of that narrative, and the familiar is what creates the emotion. That's totally fine. At the same time, we also want to be surprised. We want something we've never seen before. We want something new. And it's the same people, right? We want both of those things, and creative industries need to give audiences both of those things. But it's important to know how much of each of them that you give them, and when, and in what form. And there's no formula for it. It's not like, you watch 5 familiar sequels and then you're ready for one shock of the new. It's not like that. But both things coexist, and that's because we're complicated.
And speaking of holding, two ideas at the same time, you're both creative and passionate. You've directed your own films, and you're a creator. You're also a business leader.
Mm-hmm.
And for maybe some of our listeners or the audience or us that's watching this, what would be your advice on how to sustain both things at the same time and make sure that both are getting air and the space they need to thrive?
Well, I'm certainly a work in progress on that front, as I'm sure most of us are. I think the thing that brings those two things together, if there is a bridge between the creative side and the business side, both of them very necessary in this kind of work, it's curiosity. It's always staying curious. It's like asking questions. It's like, getting up in the morning, and most of us probably read through whatever feeds we are interested in. Why do we do that? Because we're curious about what happened since I last checked. Do you know what I mean? But some of us, that might be news from another country, right? We might be tapped into that. For other people, it might be just the social media influencers that we follow. But that curiosity is one thing. And if you're curious, then you're probably interested in new forms of creativity, right? You want to know what's interesting out there that I have not seen or heard or felt before, and who's doing that at a really high level. So let me check that out. But at the same time, in order to actually, like for us at TIFF, we have to be able to satisfy that curiosity for our audience on a regular basis. That requires money. That requires structure and process and resources and all of those things, right? So in order to be able to meet the curiosity of the people who are coming to us, we need to have our business game down.
Folks are building their careers in chunks. There's a lot of movement. They're spending 2 to 4 years here, 2 to 4 years there. We've heard a lot about the gig economy evolving. You're rare in that you've been at TIFF now for over 2 decades plus and beyond. What advice would you have to our audience on how to continue to find interest and joy and new things to learn while you're in seemingly the same space, but very much not?
I mean, my path is unusual because both of my parents worked for institutions, and they sought exactly that. They sought stability and security, as many immigrant families and parents do. My mother was a nurse. worked in emergency at Northwick General Hospital for over 30 years. My father worked in insurance, same company for decades as well. They would have liked to see me do that.
Mhm.
I didn't do that, but I did something creative, but also found an institution to help to be a part of and to help my career. Um, but I think the thing that I've tried to always do is to not be limited by what the history of the institution teaches, to try to be a part of advancing and expanding the possibility of whatever institution you're a part of. But one thing I actually do tell people earlier in their career than I am is that, like, building a kind of consistent path, no matter where you end up, actually works. You know, it is that 10,000 hours Malcolm Gladwell idea, where if you do something that is at least in the same ballpark consistently for a long time, you get better at it yourself. When you get better, you get noticed more for your accomplishment and your achievement in it. And it can be more rewarding because you get to do more, right? If you're doing it well and you advance that way, you get to do more. What I think doesn't work so well is if you're skipping from completely, different things and not building that kind of foundation. But if you're in different places doing similar things and maybe advancing, one step at a time, even if they're sideways steps sometimes, I think that can work really well. You don't have to stay at the same place, absolutely. But if you have something that you are passionate about or most passionate about, and you can find ways of doing that in new ways, at new places, then I think you actually see the rewards after many years.
So it's almost curiosity and patience.
Patience is a big one. Yes, you're absolutely right. Maybe I take that for granted because I know not everybody has patience. I kind of do take the long view, so that's come easily to me. But yeah, it's essential.
Amazing. Cameron, thank you so much for this.
Thank you.
And I'll announce, Austin Powers 4 at TIFF. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
In our dreams.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.